Thank you, Aaron. I'm going to hold on this slide for a little bit. As Aaron mentioned, there are some prerequisites to get going today, notably having some sort of local WordPress environment, be that WordPress Studio, local WP, DevKinsta, etc. Having the ClassifAI plugin available. If you have some sample posts, some sample images, some sample taxonomies, and then Ollama, which will be the local runner for AI today. If you haven't already got those, and if you're lucky enough for Wi-Fi to work, please go ahead and start that now. If not, as Aaron mentioned, there are some thumb drives available here to try and get you going. Once you get those.
The thumb drives are all taken, so
Okay.
somebody's done with them.
Yeah. Okay. And don't worry, we will slow down when we get to those parts. So thanks everyone for coming today. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you all the organizers. As Aaron noted, I'm the VP of Open Source at Fueled and 10up. Those two companies merged back in 2023. I've been with 10up since 2019. And 10up is, for those that are aware of it, is effectively the WordPress practice within Fueled. With 10up, we started working on an AI plugin called ClassifAI back in 2018 as part of a client project. We open sourced that in 2019, and for a couple years it was mostly a place for some fun research and development. And then when AI kind of exploded on the scene with OpenAI, we took it a bit more serious and had a bit more thoughtful roadmap applied to it to the point of where it is today. It did start with the Saturday Evening Post and using IBM Watson just to do content classification. So that was the humble beginning back in 2018, and it'll be the tool that we use today to connect to Ollama and show you how to utilize LLMs locally on your machine. I'm also working with folks on the WordPress AI team, so James LePage from Automatic, Felix Arntz from Google, and Pascal Birchler from Google. You can find us there at make.wordpress.org/AI. And in terms of my familiarity with WordPress, I've been using it since 2007. I've been active contributor since 2016, working on the WordPress 4.7 release, and more since then. At the speaker dinner last night, somebody asked me, what's the TLDR, what's the key takeaway from your workshop? And I kind of freaked out because I realized I didn't necessarily have that worked into my slides. So I'm going to riff on that right now. And the second thing, I told them I didn't have my slides in front of me, so I couldn't quite answer it. But really, if the slides stop working, if my local explodes, if y'all aren't able to get things installed, really, if you walk away knowing that you don't have to just use OpenAI, you don't have to just use Google, you don't have to just use Anthropic. Certainly for folks here that use those, they're lovely, but there are things you can run locally on your machine or even in your browser. Many of those are actually licensed open source, more akin to WordPress, right? You don't have to be locked into these cloud-based vendor ecosystems. So if there's one thing you take away, it's possible. Many of the images from my slides today are also from getimg.ai, just to credit them and the generations that you'll see here today. So of the AI tools that most of y'all might be familiar with that we use today are very powerful, but like I said, they lock you into that vendor ecosystem or require that you send your data to them for that processing. You lose that control, right? With WordPress, we have an opportunity to align that more with the open source values of the project. And today, I'll walk you through how you can integrate AI into your workflows without giving up that control, keeping that all locally with your machine. WordPress has always been about putting creators in control to democratize publishing. With AI, we risk reversing that unless we think intentionally about where the processing happens and who owns those outputs from the AI. Local LLMs and plugins like ClassifAI give you that privacy, give you the flexibility, and give you the control without sacrificing the capability that the LLMs give you, effectively to democratize creation. So, as the intro and as the title of the workshop here alludes to, you can go from owning your own content with WordPress to now owning your own content and owning your own AI. So before we dive into the hands-on portion, I want to take a step back and talk about why this all matters. So for some context, AI, for better or worse, is becoming the default in many people's content creation workflows. But the way that it's often delivered introduces some risks that we need to address. So most AI tools today, as I mentioned, rely on those cloud-based APIs, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, etc., where the data goes from your site out to those providers, does something, and comes back. Using those cloud-based AI can be fine for quick experiments, but when you scale to thousands of pieces of content or multiple teams, costs might explode, your policies might change, and at the source of it, you lose control of that data. That can both be a scalability problem and potentially an ethical problem. Some of the ancillary privacy risks also is that your content, your media has left your control, and it's hard to guarantee compliance with things like GDPR, client NDAs, or if you work in sensitive industries. And when we talk about owning your AI, when I talk about owning your AI, this is the risk we're trying to solve for. So most cloud-based AI providers will lock you into their ecosystem, potentially change their pricing or quotas on you unexpectedly, and potentially introduce restrictive licensing or feature access. If your workflows depend on a single proprietary API, you're vulnerable to that disruption. Closed AI platforms restrict flexibility. They limit the integration points that you might have. They might be hard to adopt because they're evolving standards, even some that appear to be relatively stable. And with those changes, community collaboration might get slowed. So open source tooling like WordPress, like ClassifAI, like the work that the WordPress AI team is doing, attempts to flip that script, right? Change the model. You get transparency, you get interoperability, and you get long-term sustainability when you stick with those open source tools. So a question for folks today, who is primarily leveraging cloud-based AI tools like Anthropic, Google, or OpenAI? I am. So there is a way to find out. My speaker notes keep going, but they don't display here. Anyway, I think what the point here is, this workshop today will help us get to that point of not being beholden to those cloud-based AIs. So now that we've talked about some of the trade-offs that the traditional cloud-based AI workflows provide us, let's talk about a different path forward, one that puts you in control. So with WordPress and the ClassifAI plugin, they provide a framework for AI that aligns with open source values, those of privacy, ownership, and extensibility. When you bring in ClassifAI and Ollama, you keep your content private by processing everything locally on your machine. And because this architecture isn't tied to a single provider, it scales whether you're a solo creator or you're managing thousands of posts across multiple brands. So I already gave you a little bit of a backstory on ClassifAI, started in 2018, but it's effectively an easy entry point for AI. And unlike some other AI plugins in this space, it's your choice which service provider powers the features there. Whether you want to use some of those cloud-based providers, again, OpenAI, Google, etc., or if you want to use local ones. It is a tool that does allow you to change which of those service providers you use, and then if those providers have different models available, you can also move those in and out. And now Ollama, the last tool we'll be using today, that effectively acts as a host running on your machine that the models that we leverage with Ollama are powered from, are hosted from. So all that inference is happening on your machine, which means you have full control of your data. You've got consistent performance, right? It's your machine, you know what's going on, and there's no third-party cost surprises. And if you're already using other runners like LM Studio, many of those will also work with ClassifAI with some slight customizations using hooks in the plugin, but ClassifAI and Ollama are tools that I'm familiar with. That's why I'm using those today. So effectively what happens here with WordPress and ClassifAI and Ollama is you have a request that originates in WordPress. For example, you've got a post and you want to generate an excerpt, right? ClassifAI intercepts that, sends that request to the service provider, be that a cloud-based one like Anthropic or locally in the case what we'll look at today with Ollama. And then the model there does its thing, runs on your device, and returns that response back to ClassifAI, presents it, in this case, in the editor, and shows you that excerpt, right? That is WordPress through ClassifAI out to the service provider in the case today, Ollama, and then back up to display in WordPress. So that all generally is privacy by design, right? Your data does not leave your laptop unless you choose to connect to an external provider to a cloud-based API. So ClassifAI also fits into a broader ecosystem of WordPress and AI. And the AI team within WordPress Core is developing canonical packages and canonical plugins like the PHP AI client and the AI experiments, with the goal of those being to make it easier for developers to integrate any AI provider without having to rewrite those implementations. This will help ensure that extensibility and reduce duplicate effort across plugins and themes. So folks like Fueled and 10up that have built ClassifAI, other teams that have built AI plugins themselves, or at an agency or developer that have built AI experiences for their clients, everybody had to kind of build that base infrastructure, right? Now the WordPress AI team is creating these canonical tools that everybody can use and kind of raise the, or lower the barrier, to create those experiences for ourselves and for our clients. My speaker notes say, read the slide dummy. Now we pause to ensure that everybody is set up locally. So if you didn't get a USB thumb, or if you have a USB thumb drive, you've already pulled the files off, if you can either kind of raise it in the air or move it to the end of the table, anybody that's still looking for those, or if the Wi-Fi is not suffice for you, try and grab one of those. And don't worry, if you don't get through everything here today, this will be recorded. I'll have details up on my website as well. You can follow along later. Read the slide dummy. So we'll go through this step by step, right? It took a while to get an AI image generator to get checklist to look anything like checklist. I'm sure you all have experienced that yourselves. So if you get into problems getting set up here, look to the person next to you, right? If they've got a local environment running and you're having problems, ask them for advice. If they've got ClassifAI running, if they've got Ollama running and you've got problems, turn and ask them. I will try and get around the room when we get into like the you try it part of this workshop, but there are a lot of you and there is one of me, so if we can work together, that'd be fantastic. So I kind of jumped all the way through, assuming you have a WordPress environment, but again, you'll want something local, right? Not a Insta WP, not something on the actual web. You want this locally because then it'll be able to communicate on your local machine to Ollama. So again, WordPress Studio, local WP, DevKinsta, etc. You want that installed, and then you want to add the ClassifAI plugin. You can get that from classifaiplugin.com. That is effectively the marketing site there. You can register on that site. Effectively, when you register, you get a key to plug into ClassifAI that unlocks automatic updates, just like you would see from other plugins. If you don't register, don't worry. You can also get it from our source, github.com/10up/classify. And again, there are USB drives floating around. Aaron is in the back, thankfully, passing them to folks that need them. And then Ollama. So OLLAMA.com, fairly sparse website. From there, hit that download. There are Windows, Linux, and Mac OS versions. They also have a list of all the models that work on that site. There are 4 that we're working with today. I've selected each of those for some fairly specific reasons. One, they're actually licensed open source. One is MIT, the other 3 are Apache 2.0. They are relatively lightweight, meaning the file size is fairly small, hoping that y'all would be able to pull them down here over Wi-Fi, or they'd be able to fit them all onto the USB thumb drives, and they're relatively performant, right? Since these are smaller models, they're probably not going to be impressive. If after this, if you go back to Ollama.com, pull down some of the more recent, some of the bigger models, you'll see just better performance and better capability from them. But for the ones I've selected here today, again, they're open source, they're relatively small, performant, and they'll show you that it can do a thing that I want to try and demo, right? All right, so you've got your local environment, you've got ClassifAI installed, you've got Ollama running, and as I mentioned, we've got 4 different models that we're going to be pulling down with Ollama today, and those are going to help us with 2 different major types of features within language processing and image processing. If you're looking for the ClassifAI settings, tools in the WordPress admin menu, and then ClassifAI is right there. In the language processing tab, the screenshot you see here on the right, I've already gone into, I think, the content classification setting. You'll basically want to go in and enable these for classification. We are using the all mini LM model for things like title generation, excerpt generation, content resizing, and key takeaways. That's the Phi 3 model. Content generation is Quen, and then tabbing over to the next tab for image processing, the alt text generation is going to be Moondream, the model there. So you want to go in, enable the feature, select Ollama as your service provider, and then select the specific model that we've got here to power that feature. The one feature here, the classification one, there are a couple extra settings that will just, if configured in this way, just makes the demo a bit more interesting for you. One is, and I can't even read the screen here, it's blurry, but it's whether you want that classification to happen manually, meaning you have to click a button to say, hey, AI, recommend me categories, tags. It'll present those to you. You can choose the ones you want and then hit save, right, to apply that to your post. Or an automatic method, which is basically through the publish workflow. It sends that post to the AI and it'll apply it without you reviewing it. Most folks at this point use the manual method, and then the classification method. This AI model will only know about the categories and tags, the taxonomies that are pre-existing on your site. So there's only one setting available to basically recommend from that data set. There are some other service providers, IBM Watson being one of them, the first thing we built with ClassifAI years ago now, which can also recommend other categories, other tags that aren't pre-existing on your site. Some editorial teams just want a bit more control over that. And so this would be the setting there, whether you want the AI to recommend new things that don't exist on your site or just recommend things that are pre-existing. In the example for today, with this model, I think the only option is items on your site, and then make sure you've got that enabled for categories and tags, and set the threshold there for about 50 or 60%. That percentile basically tells you when the AI looks to recommend categories or tags, 100% would be super precise, right? So it thinks those categories or tags it's recommending are very precise to your content. 0% would be really verbose, right? So it's going to give you a lot of data back, but it may not be that relevant. So you want to go somewhere in the middle just to see you're getting data back, and then over time you can change that percentile to be a bit more precise to what you're looking for. And then lastly, make sure that you've got published and draft set as the post status, because we'll be, at least when I demo, we'll be in a draft status of a post. And then lastly, once you've got those things configured, the easiest thing to verify that you've got a connection is go into a post, whether it's a pre-existing one or just get some sample content in there and try the title generation. It'll be in the sidebar panel on the right, a button that says generate titles, pretty simply named. You should see a modal come up and with some recommendations populating in there. If you see that, great, you've got everything working. You've got your local environment with WordPress, you've got ClassifAI installed, you've got Ollama running, and you've configured the models in Ollama with ClassifAI. If in the settings for ClassifAI, if you're not seeing any models in the dropdown, you might need to save the setting and kind of refresh, and hopefully those will populate in. If not, then that probably means you either didn't successfully over the Wi-Fi pull down the models we need today, or the thumb drives I created were junk. Apologies if that's the case. And if Ollama isn't responding, I probably can't help 240 people with that. And then again, if you came today without really any of the pre-work and you don't have any content on your site, the thumb drives had an XML file in there and some sample images. You can go into the WordPress importer, which is tools, import, and then the WordPress importer, or you might need to install that to run it. And then you'll basically select that XML file. That'll load in 2 sample posts that I have, as well as a fairly diverse set of categories and tags, so that when then the AI tries to classify those posts or any others you might generate, that you just have some data on your site for it to start with. But if you've got your, if you have your own content, please use that. Hopefully there's enough categories and tags on your site. Okay, so live demo. This is where things hopefully don't get interesting in terms of things blowing up. Hopefully things work. I do have screenshots as backup, and hopefully some folks have been able to keep up with the pace here today. But this is where we'll see ClassifAI in action, right? Showing you some sort of sparkle buttons, as it were, in the interface where you can request AI to do a thing, and you'll see that it's connecting to Ollama. It might be a little slow, but you should see a response within a couple seconds at worst. Again, these are fairly small models, but it should respond and things should work, just to show you how this conceptually could work in a production environment. And I will step through again with the configurations as I show each feature, just to try and catch up anybody that's still running a little behind. And if something fails at the end of the day, just again, remember the one takeaway is just that it's possible. You don't have to be beholden to these cloud-based providers. There are open source models that are available. And again, before I get into the demos here, I do want to emphasize from a privacy perspective, that data is staying on your machine. You're not sharing that out anywhere. This can scale to enterprise friendly scenarios. And from an extensibility perspective, you're able to select different models, right? And you don't have to use Ollama. You can use things like LM Studio, and perhaps things not like ClassifAI might also provide this functionality. So there are plenty of other options in the space. Okay, so the first feature here, content generation, using the Qwen 2.5 model. If you've got this set up, we'll show giving it a simple prompt about writing an article of the history of WordPress. Again, that generated content, your request to create it, all staying private, doesn't leave your environment. And from a scalability perspective, if you are deploying this out to larger teams, you can set some defaults for that model selection to keep the consistency across your teams for the type of content that's being generated. So I will jump out from the keynote to my laptop here. All right. Thank you, Andrew. Just here on the dashboard, I'm going to go ahead and go into Tools, ClassifAI. Again, so we're working on content generation, which is right here. You can see it's enabled. In settings, I have Ollama selected as the provider, and I've got the Qwen 2.5 model here selected. So I have that there. If I go out to posts, add a post here, in the bottom right, there's a little chat icon. And here is where I can request it to do a thing. And again, this is with the Quen 2.5 model. So generate an article on the history of WordPress. Currently tempting fate. Okay. Some creator is smiling down on me. We have content here. It's probably not exactly what I want to start with, but I'm going to go ahead and insert that into the post content here. And you can see that I've got a couple different paragraphs worth of content that was generated. I'm not necessarily, for the sake of the demo, going to worry about the accuracy of this content. Certainly the recommendation, if you're leveraging a tool, any AI tool, trust but verify, and really verify. But assuming that that the content here is accurate, I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then Andrew, if we can go back to the keynote. So that was content generation. That's using the Quen 2.5 model. For the next set of language processing features, we're going to take a look at another model that's a little smaller and more performant for some of the things we're looking to do here, starting with the concept of resizing content, and again, using the Phi3 model. So this is a feature that works inline with a paragraph text. You don't need to leave the editor. You can effectively highlight a particularly verbose paragraph and request that content gets condensed, or if you have a rather concise paragraph, you can expand it so it's a bit more, adds a bit more depth and clarity. That, kind of the key takeaway with this feature and the integration with Ollama is that the inline AI and the editing there saves some time and keeps editors focused within the content and not having to jump out to another AI tool to work with that sort of expanding and condensing content. So Andrew, if we can jump back to my desktop, thank you. I save that post. I'm going to go back and show you this setting here in ClassifAI for content resizing. So again, here we want Ollama selected. We want the Phi3 model, and I'm asking it to give me 3 recommendations. So when I say expand or condense this content, I want a couple options to choose from, and we'll see that here in the post. Again, I'm bouncing back and forth between the settings and the post. In real life, you wouldn't do that. You would have these things configured and just work in the editor. But for the sake of trying to help folks keep up, I'm going to bounce out to the settings and hopefully let folks get caught up in that way. So I'm going to go ahead and just split out this paragraph so it is a single sentence. And I'm going to ask it to expand this text, which is just a single sentence. So this is taking that content and the post content around it, sending it to the Phi3 model, asking it to expand on that. I should see a modal that comes up with 3 different recommendations because that's what I said I wanted. And I can see those here along with some data about that content I got back from the model, right? How many extra words, how many extra characters. And because I really want to expand it, I'm going to pick this one here that added 49 words and 332 characters. And we can see now that I've got a lot more content there. And let's say this intro paragraph, I wanted it to be a bit more concise. So here you can condense, and the same thing effectively is happening here, right? That specific piece of content within the rest of the post content is sent to Phi3. It is processing that and will send back, there we go, 3 different responses here. And I'm going to take the one that reduces it the most and go ahead and save that. Andrew, if we can go back to the keynote, please. Thank you. Got some different information on the confidence monitor here, but I will wing it. The next feature we'll talk about is title generation. Again, still using that Phi3 model. And if you want to go ahead and, oh, here we go. There's some notes. There we go. Thank you, Andrew. So again, here, right, the important item is with this, just like the the expanding and condensing content, what you get back from the AI here, the different title suggestions, you'll see those in a modal. An author or an editor can choose to edit those, can choose to accept one of them, or regenerate, right? You're not beholden specifically to what the AI has generated. And this works fairly well for large publishers managing hundreds of new posts a day. Andrew, if you want to jump back to the browser. So this one, we're talking about title generation in ClassifAI. Again, we've got Ollama, and you'll want the Phi-3 model. And again, 3 different suggestions here, just so we have something for an author or an editor to review. So here we've got that content that we had generated from Quen. We resized a bit of it with Phi-3, and now we're going to have it hopefully generate some titles for us. They're not all terrible. Some are. I don't particularly care, but let's just take this one here and add that in. And again, like all content in WordPress, we can edit it from here. Apologies for the capital A. I'm going to leave it alone. Andrew, if you want to pop back to Keynote, please. So the next one with the Phi-3 model, again, here will be excerpt generation. So you've got post content, you've got a title. Now we're going to send both those things to the service here, because we don't want the excerpt and the title to be fairly similar, because a lot of times on the front end, the title and excerpt get presented fairly close to each other. So you want some deduplication there. Right, and some of the benefits of ensuring that you're creating excerpts here is that shows up a lot of times if that content is reused in a newsletter, for search previews, and also in category and tag feeds. So Andrew, if you can jump back. So what are we talking about here? Excerpts, right? ClassifAI, excerpt generation. This should be, similar as the last one, right? Ollama, the Phi-3 model. There's no additional recommendations here or settings here. It's just generating a singular excerpt. So going back into the post and down in the excerpt section, we have generate excerpt. If you get into the publishing workflow, it's also there as well with no excerpt. So let's go ahead and generate. Phi-3 has been pretty good so far today, so I expect that we'll get something back fairly quickly. The excerpt from Phi-3 in my tests so far have been a bit more lengthy than you would probably want. That's a solid several sentences, and it also references me, which would probably not how I would at least write an excerpt, but we'll save that for now. Andrew, again, if you want to jump back to the slide. And then the next one, which I think is the last one we're talking about today that uses the Phi-3 model, is key takeaways. So this one, with the attention deficit that all of us have today, we all want that TLDR, or many of us want that TLDR, especially if it's a long form post. Having that up on the top part of the article can kind of help give folks that context of what exactly is happening here, so that they read the rest of the article, they've got an understanding of what they're getting into. Some practical use cases here is just, again, those reader-friendly highlights. If you're using WordPress potentially within an organization as an intranet, this can be helpful for internal editorial briefings, executive summaries. And then, again, with newsletters, this could be some summarized sections in those. And also, if you're scaling this out to enterprise teams as potentially a large documentation set, it can help summarize that information for on-site search as well. So Andrew, if you want to jump back to my desktop. Familiar here, ClassifAI, and key takeaways. Here we go. So again, you're setting Ollama, the Phi-3 model, and then that's it for the settings for the most part. So back to the post here, and then I will, top toolbar, please. Right here, You can go to the block inserter, look for key takeaways. The slash command, you can look for key takeaways. You can also look for TLDR, which is my favorite. TLDR, if I can actually find the keys on my keyboard. Key takeaways. So again, this is sending that post content, sending the title if it exists, sending the excerpt if it exists out to, or locally, not out, but locally to the Phi3 model, and is attempting to generate some of the takeaways about this article. And you can change that from bullets here to a paragraph if you want, but I'll leave it as bullets for now. And then Andrew, if you want to jump back to the keynote, thank you. So now we're going to shift to a different model. This one is an embeddings model, all mini LM. And this helps with smarter tagging and categorization based upon the embeddings of all of the categories and tags on your site. So again, we'll show this again with that blog post I've been creating, where ClassifAI will instantly recommend those relevant categories and tags using, in this case, the all mini LM model. Your taxonomies, so categories, tags, if you have something custom as well, those all get embedded locally with this model, which allows it, when it attempts to match the post content, fairly near instant with how those categories and tags are plotted out in vector space there. And again, as with everything else, right, some privacy wins here is that none of that is set externally. None of your categories, none of your tags, not the embeddings model, and not the post content. It's all here on your device. So Andrew, if you want to jump back again. Tools, classify, classification. Okay, so Ollama, and this time it's the all mini LM one. It's important here that that's selected and you're not selecting a different one, because this is an embeddings model, which is different from the text processing models that we already used, as well as the Moondream one, which is a vision model. And as I mentioned on the screenshot earlier, you want that manual review. There's really no additional option here for the classification method. And then here I've set it to 50% for categories and tags. So this will be a bit verbose, won't be super precise, but I'll at least get some data back so you can see this working. And again, ensuring that that's working for a draft post status. Maybe you've already published this locally, so in that case, the published one works fine. And if you want that on pages and posts, to enable it there. But for our sake today, I'm just showing in a post. So edit, and then in a sidebar, I'm going to, as I said earlier, the manual recommendation method. If this was set up for the automatic method, it would just happen as part of the publishing workflows. It would send that content to the all mini LM model. It would identify the categories and tags it thinks are relevant to your post. It would apply them as part of that publishing flow. But me, as a singular editorial team, wants to review those. One thing I'll show here, we've got uncategorized as the default category on the site. I'm going to add two other sample ones here, and I'm going to add a sample tag, gardening. I don't know why that came to mind, but it did. And I'm going to save it so that I'm showing you here that I've got some pre-existing categories that are already applied to this post. And when I ask for the recommendations there from the model, you'll see here in the modal, within brackets, the capital A, capital I, that's telling you that the all mini LM, these are the ones that it recommended, and the ones that I had pre-selected on the site, uncategorized, and the other couple ones that I selected, those are shown here without that precursor, so you know which has been recommended and which is already on the site. I don't want uncategorized, and I actually don't want these other two because they don't pertain to the article. The rest, we'll say, are good enough. I'll save that, and then that is updated and applied to the post. Andrew, you can pop back to the keynote. And then the last example today is showing another model, the Moondream model, and then one of the image processing features here, alt text generation. Now, I know in the accessibility space there are concerns that alt text generated by AI, by a computer, is not good, is not desired. Counter argument to that is that that might be better than nothing for sites that just don't have the time or the ability to apply that alt text to their images. So setting aside that conversation for afterwards. We'll go ahead, Andrew, if you want to jump back to browser here, and now you've got to go to the image processing, descriptive text generator. Again, Ollama. In this case, we're looking with the Moondream model. I'm saving that into the alt text field. That can also go into the caption or description if that happens to be what your theme wants the alt text to be in for perhaps your rendering on the front end. And again, with this one, the processing mode of automatic or manual, I just want this to happen when I upload an image, so I'm going to make that automatic. So back here into the post about the history of WordPress, we've got our title, we've got our key takeaways, we've got our excerpt, we've got our post content, but you know what, let's do it as a, I'll put it here in the image. I was going to do a featured image, but we'll just do one here. Image. Uploading. So while this is uploading it locally, it's also sending that image once it's uploaded out to the model, and it is trying to identify and describe what is in the image. And we can see that here on the right, and the alt text here in the sidebar of the black editor, a man giving a presentation on stage with a large whiteboard behind him that has the words Q&A written on it. It's not a whiteboard, and some of us might be able to identify that man. So I'll save that there. But there you go. We've basically created a post that shows all these different things that you can use AI to do, and you're not necessarily, again, beholden to cloud-based providers. You're using, in all these examples here, these are open source models. These are all available locally on your machine. And one of the nice things with Ollama is the user interface that it comes with. You can also use this as though it were you know, a web-based ChatGPT sort of experience, right? You can ask it to do things here as it's local on your environment. It doesn't have to be just integrated with WordPress. So if I wanted to generate that article here, generate an article about the history of WordPress, right? If I want this interaction outside of WordPress, the nice thing about Ollama is that all works here as well. So we'll let that go. And then Andrew, if you can go back to Keynote. So continuing to reiterate all those features, right? It's privacy safe at scale, right? Everything is local. You're not sending anything to cloud-based AI. With the alt text one, that image description is generated fairly instantly, right? You're seeing that in the editor. If you uploaded it to the media library, or if I did it in a cover block or a featured image, it's the same experience there. No third parties are scanning that image. No third parties are scanning any of our post content, right? It is all private. And again, with alt text, there's a conversation to be had, but theoretically does increase accessibility of your content on your site by having that alt text with all your images. So hopefully at this point, those that maybe weren't following along with me, were still rushing to get things installed over Wi-Fi or from the thumb drives. Hopefully at this point, you've got some sort of a local environment. Hopefully you've got ClassifAI installed and activated, some of the settings configured to Ollama, and some of the models pulled down. So you can try this on your own site. And again, the thumb drives had the XML files there with some sample content, 2 posts there. There are 3 images as well in that folder. And when you load that XML file, you'll also get categories and tags so that if you don't have those on your site, when you try and do that content classification with the all mini LM model, you'll be able to see things working there as well. So once you've got that working, maybe that's working here today, maybe you'll get it working later. There's the question of, okay, that's great. That was a local environment on my machine. That was a local LLM on my machine. but, I work for, I work at an agency or I have clients of my own, and their sites aren't on my machine, they're on the web, right? Maybe there are multiple people that I'm working with, right? How does this scale? You want to have this working on a staging environment. You want to have this on a production environment. You've got those larger teams and richer workflows, right? This isn't just a nice demo on a local environment. How does this scale out? And so the last part here, trying to frame up those next steps for those of you that want to dig in a little deeper inside, instead of just playing with this locally, how you might scale it out. So we focus today on that local first model for speed and privacy. But if you want to connect Ollama or LM Studio or other open source models to a live site, you'll probably need to do some sort of tunneling. You can use something like ngrok for an easy, cheap option to do some demos and proofs of concept, but you'll need to work with your infrastructure teams, your systems teams, whomever, to get that set up to use in a production environment. But there are orgs using those dedicated internal Ollama instances and custom models that they may have used there or trained themselves. Stable Diffusion is another service that can do image generation, right? We didn't get into that today, but that is another one that can be used for image processing. And that is, my speaker notes say that that's a feature coming in the next version of ClassifAI, but that actually shipped last week and I didn't update my slides. So that is also now available. I didn't demo it today, but Stable Diffusion can be used locally to generate imagery. There are other things, I've talked about the pros and cons of using cloud-based AI and why I think you should be considering local ones. There are also browser-based ones, right? Google, Chrome, and the Canary browser, in an experimental way, allow for AI in the browser, right? A model embedded in that install, in that app on your machine. So that is a third approach. It doesn't have to be cloud-based. If a local one doesn't work for you, potentially if Chrome is your primary browser or one that you would use with Teams, this is available right now. And this approach enables fast and local inference right inside the browser as well. There's a tutorial on ClassifAI's developer documentation site. I won't get into it today, but if you want to test out Chrome AI as a service provider, you can also see that working and testing with ClassifAI and WordPress. As I mentioned a second ago, or I have this described as a future opportunity using local models to do image generation, and that this was supposed to be the next thing on the roadmap with ClassifAI. I was supposed to say that Stable Diffusion would let you generate images locally and keep all that content private. And I was going to encourage you that if you're interested for that to follow along in the GitHub PR, but Darren Cotter and the rest of the fantastic team back at Fueled actually finished that up and shipped that last week as a bit of a going away present for me coming here to Portland. So that is also available in the environments that you have here. It's missing that one component of Stable Diffusion, but effectively with what you have running there locally, you can also generate images. So again, scaling this for larger teams and for an enterprise, not just a single person working on their own machine. So you'll need that AI to scale, both technically and organizationally, right? Like not just one person, not just one location. That shared infrastructure and the team coordination there can help avoid some of that duplicate setup if everybody in the organization had to have this locally. But if you're using ClassifAI, Ollama, Stable Diffusion, those sorts of things can be set up in an enterprise environment. And WordPress and ClassifAI and those local models already are being used today in enterprise editorial workflows and in pipelines in production. And then circling back to what is hopefully been an ongoing theme today, but if your content creation workflows rely on a single AI API provider, you're taking on some risk there. Tools like ClassifAI, tools like WordPress, those let you experiment, those let you swap out models, and those let you scale beyond being tied to those proprietary systems. And then again, the WordPress AI team, right? The PHP AI client work that's going on, the MCP adapter, the Abilities API, which is currently planned to land in WordPress 6.9 here in December of this year, and then the AI experiments plugin. All of those make multimodal support. So image generation, language generation, it all makes that possible. It all makes that interoperability easier. And for folks trying to build these experiments, the table stakes now exist. You have these tools available. Again, make.wordpress.org/AI. You can learn more about it there. And ClassifAI is already designed to integrate cleanly with those standards that are coming from the WordPress AI team. So that future with the WordPress, with AI in WordPress, it's open, that future is flexible, and it's designed to give creators real choices. You'll be able to pick the tools that make the most sense for your workflow without sacrificing your privacy or locking yourself into a single provider. Next. So you can follow along ClassifAI with either the GitHub source, github.com/10up/ClassifAI, or the marketing site itself, classifaiplugin.com. And the WordPress AI team, you can follow along there, make.wordpress.org/AI. And, just remember, at the end of the day, AI should work for you, right? Not the other way around. Let's continue building these tools together as a community to make sure that we can keep it that way. All right, so wrapping up here, we've seen how local first, privacy conscious AI can give you control over your content, control over your workflows, and control over your future with content publishing. And now let's put that all together and show where you can go next from there. So some of the core workshop themes here today: privacy, control, scalability, and leveraging open ecosystems of which WordPress is part of. And this isn't just about AI features, it's about protecting the ownership and avoiding lock-in while making your editorial workflows faster and easier and smarter. So there is a good amount of time left today. I'm not sure if folks are still working locally. If you've got questions, I can take those either at the microphone in the far back or here kind of towards the front.
Hi, great presentation. My question is you kept switching models based upon the thing you were trying to do. And so is each of those models tuned? So one model is for creating the tags for the images. The second model is for the excerpt. Or is that kind of how it's set up right now?
Yes, Andrew, if you would switch to the laptop to the browser, please. Let me increase this a little bit more here. So I'm giving you a bit of a visual because that's how my brain works. But yes, great plant in the audience question there. The different models I selected were for specific reasons, right? There are embedding ones that you can search for here. That is the feature that when you're doing that content classification, you'll need a model that uses, or that's an embeddings model for being able to observe an image and describe it. That was a vision model. And then the other ones are effectively language processing models. So those were purposely different for those features. But here on Ollama, you can search for ones that are much more performant, much larger, but still you want to make sure that you're selecting one that ties to the feature that you're looking to leverage. Here in the front.
Hello, hi. My name's Jan. Thank you for the great work. And I don't mean to say anything disparaging, but couldn't you essentially have done what you did with just a lot of cut and paste with?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm finding it kind of hard to make peace with what you say, which is it's better than nothing. Well, if it's really better than nothing, then some of the prompt you'll be sharing may not be worthy of being protected with data compliance and doing locally, especially if you're using a relatively little model. And if I can make a suggestion, would it be any in your road path or roadmap to incorporate something with like a VLM that you could kind of add the angle of rag or being able to enhance the offering? So in spite of everybody else using the exact same model, since I get to curate my own data, I'll have something that's really, truly unique because I'll be curating that data that enhances those adapters like in Ollama.
Sure. Yeah, and no offense taken either. Yeah, keep in mind, ClassifAI itself and what I showed here today and the defaults there are intended to target a default experience, right? Show you that AI can be integrated and do certain things with your website. You don't need to enable them all. You can change the service provider you want. If you've created your own custom model, the ClassifAI and the sources available, there are plenty of hooks available to hook in and change those. So if there is something that just makes more sense for your team, by all means, take ClassifAI. It's free, open source. It costs nothing. Take it and use it to do that. But what it ships with is intended to be just baseline showing that is functionally capable, and it's generally up to people that are using ClassifAI to configure it to a manner that works for their editorial teams and for their editorial workflows, right? So if there's something that sounds like for you is a bit more precise than that default experience, it's extensible. Please, please do that. It is there. And if there are, hooks missing for what you need to do, those are things that we'd be happy to introduce. That's a fairly solvable problem.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul. Sounds like what you're saying is this is a starting place, right, to build on top of, which is a good answer to my questions too. The first question was, do you have it set up so that it can access models hosted on Bedrock?
So Amazon Bedrock is something we've looked at integrating with. That is, for others, it's a tool where, kind of like Ollama, you can more easily swap in other AI LLMs. We haven't yet. Like I mentioned, we have some samples of how you can add in other service providers, of which Bedrock would be a service provider. And then, like it's shown here in the settings with Ollama, where you're then able to select the model, you could extend that as well to select whatever you have set up in your Bedrock account. So doesn't technically yet exist in ClassifAI. You could absolutely extend it to do that. If you did, I would love a PR back so we could bring it into the core tool itself. If not, it is something that is described in our backlog.
Good answer. And I was also going to ask about the RAG access or maybe tool access. Do you have does this need support in this piece, or is that just part of the model?
Yeah, that would be part of the model. If you've got one where you've got that, that extra content sent to it, there's not an example I have that I could show you that here right away. But, again, fully extensible. And if that's something that is more helpful for the team or teams you're working with, then totally possible. But I just don't have a canned demo for that today.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And I wanted to go back to a second to the question before. Sorry, I'll get to y'all then. The question about is this any better than copying and pasting, going back and forth between tools? Like, no, this is literally the same thing, except with ClassifAI, we purposely tried to build into the native experience of the editor, right? Like where an author is creating the content, allow it to interact with the AI there. What you're doing, you're saying, generate a post for me or generate titles. That is something you could go to ChatGPT or you could go to Claude and say, do this, and then copy that and come back and paste it. But ClassifAI tries to eliminate some of that jumping back and forth and the friction there. Those micro precisions add up a lot over time, and for many of us are working with editorial teams that have been cut back. They're much smaller, right? Newsrooms aren't the size they used to be. So some of those micro optimizations of being able to have that native in the editor, yes, it's the same as going out to another tool and copying and pasting, but we think that it's just better to have that native in the editor. So yeah, next question. Thank you.
Two things. Hi, I'm Luke. And I had a question on what do you recommend for infrastructure and what do you recommend for security? Because if it's on a server, like on a server by your WordPress server, that's going to be a really beefy server probably. And if it has Ollama, it has that one port open that theoretically anyone could go and send queries to or use. So what do you recommend for infrastructure? What do you recommend for security?
Correct, yeah. So for today's demo, the local environment in Ollama does have that port opens just so you can see that communication happening back and forth. Your question has kind of now reached the bounds of my knowledge. Fortunately, my colleagues at Fueled and 10up are uniquely and more talented than I and can definitely answer that question. Toss that into the GitHub issue or reach out in WordPress Slack or, Andrew, if you want to jump back to Keynote, we'll advance to the last slide where I've got some of my contact information and you can reach out to me that way as well as soon as we get there.
Thank you.
Hey there, my name is Ben. I have a question more about what ClassifAI is doing, and this may be a little in the weeds too as well. I don't know where your expertise is most focused, but I'm wondering if ClassifAI either does or offers hooks to help facilitate identifying content that was generated by AI. Like the use case I'm thinking of is like whether it's like an image alt or key points or something like that. Something where we would want to use AI to generate that as a stand-in to get content created, but my editorial team might want to circle back and be able to sort of audit and review and like have the human come by and rewrite that alt tag to be a little better because it was a specific person. Is it dropping in any sort of block metadata or anything like that to sort of allow for that like origin tracking, or are there some hooks that we could use to do that?
Yeah, great question. There are some features where that does happen. So the image generation, which we didn't get to today, but if you want to test that locally, Stable Diffusion, or if you're using DALL-E or something like that, the prompt to generate that image, generate a pelican on a bicycle, right? That gets saved as the caption. That gets saved as the alt text for that generated image, and then we also put in an attribution for the service provider and model that you're using in the caption. So if you're using, DALL-E, it'll put in there, generated with DALL-E. Now, obviously, somebody could go and strip all of that out. We're not saving it in meta anywhere else. Tools like DALL-E now are also using, and my brain is not coming up with the tooling that I think Adobe started with that basically stores a lot of how an image was generated, where it was generated as metadata attached to the image. I forget what that is, but it can show actually like the provenance of that image. We're not doing that in ClassifAI. We actually have, I think, 2 issues in the backlog that talk about trying to do more of that that is being stored with DALL-E and trying to represent that in WordPress somehow and show that, as well as potentially also on the front end using, again, my brain is failing me what the name of that tool or that
Content Authenticity Initiative.
Content Authenticity Initiative. Thank you. And there's like a little icon, like ID maybe or something. So that is possible. And we've also talked about doing that with all the text processing. If that's something that is particularly useful to you, I'd love to talk afterwards and just understand how ideally that might work. Because we could, throw it into Meta somewhere, but understanding how you would want to use it would kind of help us craft, how best to create a default experience with that in ClassifAI.
Thank you.
Hi. So one of the questions that my team had was we're running into an issue with trying to figure out a way to streamline or automate quality assurance for our websites before launching. Do you know if ClassifAI has anything in the roadmap to kind of cover doing quality assurance testing or stress testing on websites, or even if there's SEO keyword recommendations or meta description recommendations that could be auto-generated?
So from a stress testing, QA testing, no. SEO keywords, meta description, the excerpt generation feature I showed you, many SEO tools will take that excerpt and use that as the meta description. So if you're using the excerpt generation, you'll more or less benefit with the SEO tool using that. Again, ClassifAI is extremely extensible, so whatever that might be that you're using for SEO, whatever that plugin is, if it's already providing AI functionality or not, could be something that could be tied in together and leverage Classify to generate those keywords per se related to the post. But in terms of stress testing or QA testing a site, that's not currently part of Classify's functionality, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrew Engstrom from Curious Minds Media. I got a quick question for you regarding the content that we're putting together into these posts. So far, I've got a good idea as to what the plugin's capable of, but one thing that I'm curious about is if I'm a content writer on a WordPress site and I'm publishing content and I have a certain way of writing, right? But then I use this tool to kind of augment from whichever different model perspective to augment or add content or change content. My worry is, does that content actually stay in line with my way of writing? And that's my biggest question. Like at our organization right now, we've created something internally using OpenAI to mimic our CEO's way of speaking.
Yeah.
And it works very well. We feed it a bunch of content into it, and it kind of reads that content, learns from it, and understands his way of speaking. It was kind of like an interesting use case. Is there something like that planned for this tool?
It feels like you're planting the audience as well. That's a great question. We've tried something similar, I think, around Q1 of last year. Also, targeting an executive and trying to mimic their tone. For those of you that are familiar with Fuel or 10up, Darren and I refer to it as JakeBot because we were trying to mimic Jake Goldman in the very precise way he crafts content. And when we tried it then, it was rather difficult to train the model in a performant way, in a cost-effective way. I say that it was Q1 of last year means it's almost entirely much more performant, much more cost-effective today. We haven't looked into that more recently, but that is absolutely theoretically possible. One kind of simpler approach we've looked at and is coming hopefully in the next major release is not necessarily getting to that specific tone of your CEO, but when you are requesting text to be generated, being able to select types of tone. So, Andrew, if you want to jump back to my desktop, please. I don't have it working, or I don't have it here on my environment, but conceptually, let me jump into here. So content generation. So many of the features in Classify that are using a prompt. Classify ships with default prompt. And the question earlier about what's being generated might be good enough. This is effectively a base prompt to try and get out the result that we want in this case for generating content, right? You can add a new prompt, humorous, right? I didn't spell that right. Please generate this with a very humorous, I just spelled it wrong again, tone. Point being, you could, in this feature we're looking at releasing, is you could have different types of prompts that are basically different tones or different types of voice, so that if you're trying to target the CEO, or maybe you're trying to target the CTO if they're publishing a more technical post, you could have different types of tone that you want that text to be generated in. So not just if you're working with a newsroom and it's only that CEO that's publishing, you probably just want to use a model that's trained on them. And that is something, like I said, a year ago, not really realistic for most folks. Now probably more realistic. Haven't checked in it recently, but you can get around it a little bit with a feature that's coming out where you can kind of create a couple different types of tones and then select those when you're generating text-based content.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I have 29 minutes and 40 seconds, but it doesn't look like that many questions. So if y'all are done, if I've said my piece as far as you're concerned, by all means, go have a break. I will stick around and ask any other questions. Otherwise, I see Aaron coming with the hook to pull me off stage since there's nobody else standing at the mics. Otherwise, I'll let Aaron wrap up here in a second, and I will stick around for anybody else that has questions. With the final slide here, You can get a hold of me in a couple different places, right? My website, jeffpaul.com. Pretty much any social platform, I'm at Jeff Paul, WordPress.org, GitHub, Blue Sky, or LinkedIn, and happy to answer questions there after the event.